everybody. Welcome to RealTuners Radio, episode 98. Wow, 98. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about fuels and our experiences with them, and we actually did manage to get a special guest. He's Jason Ruckert from VP Fuels. We'll also talk a little bit about my experience at World of Speed on the Salt Flats last weekend, and finally, whatever else you guys want to talk about. Post your questions in either the Facebook comments, the Mixler chat, or the YouTube comments sections. Thanks for joining us here at RealTuners Radio. Let's get this thing started. All right, what's up, everybody? How's it going on this beautiful Wednesday evening? The weather's nice up here in the Midwest. Fall is in the air. So are the smells of burnt fuels of different types and varieties. I prefer C16, everybody knows that. Fortunately, we have a guy here tonight from VP Fuels, which is cool. He decided to get on at the last minute and help us out. So anyway, make sure everybody's logged into the chat of your choice. You can throw us some questions. As usual, we intended to plan better, I promise. But anyway, flying by the seat of our pants, just having a good chat with our buddies in the industry. So that being said, I will go ahead and bring in Mr. Bewley. Are you with us tonight, brother? Yes, you are.
Yeah, we're here.
Cool. Brian Barnhill's here with us. You there, Brian?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yay. Bill Fowler. He's struggling with computer issues at the moment. He's on mute. But he's here, I assure you.
Bring the volume up a little, Scott.
Turn my volume up a little? Or
yeah,
everybody's
background.
volume?
Bring primary volumes up on everybody so the background's a little higher compared to the foreground.
All right, try that. See what it does. If you can't hear me at all, say something. If you can hear us, then deal with it. I'm kidding. I don't have Evans on tonight, though, so it's always a little scary.
Wait,
we got
sound a lot better now.
Yep.
So.
All right, Jason, you there?
I'm here.
Cool.
Hanging out.
Bewley, go ahead and give this guy an intro.
All right. Tonight we have the infamous, maybe famous Pooch, Jason Ruckert from VP Fuels with us. The one of probably, I guess, known more so anything as a track prep guy. Goes around, does a lot with track prep. He services east of the Mississippi, Indiana to Alabama. I've seen him at Ohio Valley. He's at Huntsville this weekend trying to put the sticky icky down for all the boys that are going to be there for Radio Fest this coming weekend. But being a representative of VP Fuels, I'm sure he's got some input for us tonight to talk about that. If anybody's got track prep questions too about some of the stuff that they got, Jason is also going to be a really, really good a reference person for us to discuss things about prep. Yeah. That as well.
So
I can give you a quickie rundown if you want the quickie bio.
Yeah, give us your bio and take all the time.
Give us a rundown of it all.
Okay. I've been a VP for 20 years. I started in sales. I just a hot rod guy, just a drag racer. I grew up about 40 miles from Milan, Michigan. So Milan Dragway was the first track I ever went to and snuck away and took my Oldsmobile and went 1660s and thought it was a rocket ship. And so, and then, like I said, I started a VP in May of '99 in sales. Didn't know anything about racing fuel, but just had the desire to learn and. Was in sales till about 06, and then in 06, they asked me to manage the place. And like I said, we cover 14 states here in the Midwest. And after about a year of management, I wasn't real fond of it. I'd still like just the gearhead stuff. And that's when the owner of the company, the man that started the VP, Steve Burns, said, you're a gearhead, man. He said, you should be out here helping me work on stuff. And I said, well, I'll do whatever I got to do. So I started traveling all over the world and helping develop fuels and then eventually into our traction compound. And I'm not a chemist, but I would go into a dyno shop and he'd say, take this base stock, dyno it. And then he'd go, okay, we need to make more power, put this in it. And that's how I helped develop Q16, M5, 113, a lot of our oxygenated fuels, and did that. And then I ended up going to Orlando Speed World for the World Street Nationals in 2005, and kind of took an interest. We already had traction compound, but didn't know a whole lot about it, and started just kind of diving into that, and that turned into going all over the world and going to different racetracks and learning about how to prep and as everything's evolved, as you guys well know, in the drag race end of it. I mean, it used to be big tire pro mod stuff, and that was the upper echelon, and then it started into the radial stuff, and I got with Donald Long back in 2000 and I believe 7 or 8 down at Sunshine Dragway in Florida, and started working with him and prepped his first radial race he ever had at Bradenton, and we just kind of went from there. So it's been a pretty cool long trip. It's funny, I've been, like I said, cruising down here to help the guys down here at Huntsville for Radial Fest and the Jones clan and whatnot, and then I started getting tagged in some messages, and they said fuel expert, and I wanted to write back because I was driving. I couldn't really text anything, but I wanted to say not an expert, but boy, I tell you what, I'll lie to you until you feel good.
That's great.
But yeah. So like I said, I appreciate you guys. Like I said, I can sure as heck try to steer you in the what I would assume would be a right direction. There's a lot of different things in the fuel world. I looked at a couple of the questions and ideas. I know one guy wanted to talk about methanol, and I'm sure I'm sure the dreaded E85 is going to come up, which Pump E85 is not racing fuel.
He should just be on our. He should just be on the show with us. He should just stay on permanently.
Yes.
Set up team.
What now?
Listen, right now I am on Team Pooch. Okay.
Yeah, join the club.
10%. I am on Team Pooch right now.
Our results. We're all tuners, Jason. So we're gonna have questions if you feel like, man, I don't know, or here, just give us your experience as far as it goes, whatever.
Sure.
There's nothing, but I mean, my first question is, when you're dynoing fuels in an engine, are you targeting a specific engine combo? For example, I know, or I've got a pretty good hunch that big bore, naturally aspirated stuff likes oxygenated fuel, likes the Q16, right? Because I've been at Bischoff's. I know you guys did some early testing at BES. And I was around.
That was where it started. That is where Q16
a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. About killed Richie in the dyno room.
Right. Richie's one of my favorite good buddy tuners. So what? Are you building a combination for are you trying to put the chemistry together for a specific combo? Does that even exist as a concept?
Well, it does. I mean, if you look at like our motocross fuels and stuff like that, and the that type of realm, yeah, a lot of those were pinpointed towards, back in the day, the guys at Pro Circuit out in California were needing, a certain fuel. And so Steve would aim it at that. But like when Q16 and 113 and our oxygenated, when we started really hammering at that, it was just that concept that an oxygenated fuel carries its own oxygen molecule. So in layman's terms, it's like having a shot of nitrous oxide, because it allows you to burn more fuel, and you burn more fuel, you make more power. And that's just the whole point of it. So it was never designed for a certain application. I mean, they called it, I should say that when Steve Burns and I started talking about it, he wanted to make this fuel, this oxygenated product that he knows it's more consistent in the bracket race world, because it isn't as affected by weather swings like day to night and things like that, and altitude changes. But also, it will make more power. So originally he called it Q16 for quick 16 racing. So, naturally aspirated dragsters. But I'll tell you where the kick in the shorts came with it. This was was when I went to Orlando that first year. I mean, I didn't know anybody. I had just started heads up racing myself. I quit bracket racing in 2002, 3-ish. And a gentleman named Lauren Kintner, who ran with this outfit called the OSCA in Kentucky, said, man, you should come do this heads up stuff. And that's when I became friends with Jim Summers at ATI Pro Charter, and
Yes.
the rest went downhill from there. But so I'm down there, and I'm amazed at Orlando. This is the first big event like that I'd ever been to for heads up racing. And there's a guy named Steve Petty and Tim Lynch. I didn't know him from Adam. And I walked over there with some buckets of fuel and said, "Hey, I'm Jason from VP. Would you guys mind trying this stuff?" And that was it. And I left it at that. And about 2 weeks later, Steve Petty calls me up and says, "Hey, man, that stuff you got's really good."
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, what do you mean it's good? He said, "I had a single turbo car on C16 making 1,000 to the tire." He says, "We put that in, added 6%, and it made 1,100 to the rear tire, picked up 100 horsepower."
Wow.
And that
10%.
was it.
Yeah,
That
that's
was the
awesome.
start. And so again, so it wasn't aimed at any sort of combination, and we did find out later a high winding, small chambered head doesn't like it as much because Q16 needs volume. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we had some Mopar guys that had a wedge head that had a real small chamber and were turning like 9,500 RPM, almost like a pro stock truck type.
Yeah, and it didn't help them as much, if at all.
Nope, but C25 was great.
Yeah,
C25 worked awesome.
Wow.
Because
Okay.
a quick burn,
So there are combos that take a shine to certain different fuel types, obviously. So okay. Good.
Yeah, and then you find out. Okay, here's a cool thing. C25, I just mentioned it. C25 was our pro stock dyno fuel back in the early 2000s, because we had other better fuels called C32, C34, C36, and eventually C44, which was one of the craziest fuels ever. That was an oxygenated fuel that passed every tech out there, but they got outlawed by NHRA. But 25 it ended up becoming the pro stock NHRA spec fuel, and we ran it for years. Well, in the nitrous world, C23 was the best fuel you could have for eons. It was developed 25 years ago.
Right.
Well, once these guys started going fuel injection and huge bore, big bore stuff, they kept burning pistons. You'd pinch a ringland, you'd burn a piston, all sorts of weird stuff.
Sure.
What we ended up finding out was that 23 didn't burn complete enough in something that didn't have to atomize and vaporize tumbling down an intake manifold, because it was getting squirted right in, at the back of the intake valve. And so it wasn't completely burning. And basically my analogy is it left firewood on the fire. So somewhere in that stroke, even though it's not sparking, it was hot and it caught fire, and either it was on the upstroke and you pinched a ringland, or it was going down and it popped the top of the piston up. And so these guys figured out that C25 burned super clean, and you well know with nitrous, if you don't have any sort of fuel in the cylinder, it can't burn.
Right.
You can spray straight nitrous on top of
and it won't run.
It's going to pepper it.
I tell people that,
but it's not going to burn.
I tell people that they think it's going to destroy the motor, and it doesn't. Yeah.
No. I mean, I've had guys that, like I said, the fuel jet's clogged up, and all it does is it looks like it shot peas on top of the piston, but it doesn't burn it up. And so the 25 became the hot shoe bob. Well, you look at it on paper, C25 doesn't look like it should last. It's got a lower octane, 114 octane, which everyone wants 120 plus. It's got a higher vapor pressure, which most nitrous stuff wants low vapor pressure. Things like that. But you realize that in the way that the fuel injected big bore applications are now. I mean, that's just I'm sure you saw last week in Virginia, Marcus Burt went 357 in a nitrous car, and that's with C25 in the tank, 960 cubic inches.
Yeah, that was nuts. Side by side passes in the 50s now. God, I mean that makes me feel old. But
when I prepped Donald's first race, and in the final it was Will Stevenson and Troy Perez Sr. And I think one of them went a 475 and one went a 477, and we thought the world had ended in radial racing.
That's hilarious. Yeah, a 477. Oh my God.
Yep.
So, all right, let's see. What else was somebody else was asking a question here already? Dahlquist, did you guys have a question? He had somebody, and he's watching the chat with us.
Well, he was talking about
stoichiometric ratio versus air fuel. I saw something about that.
Mark, go ahead with the question.
Well, he was talking. I'm a little bit behind here, but he was talking about blends, and Tom Vigu piped up with he likes Q with a little bit of C45 mixed with it.
Holy moly! That right there that's like crack on a cracker. That's and again, C45 that started as an Australian pro stock fuel, high winding, 10,000 plus RPM.
Fast burning
small blocks.
Yeah.
And a
well, that would be Tom Vigu.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So interesting. Huh.
But what you found out with that fuel, it's got a very low octane, it's got a high vapor pressure, and it's very, very sensitive to timing. And so you would run into, on the dyno. Okay, for instance, I was dynoing with Schmidt one time, and C45 on one of these truck pull engines made 25 better than Q16 on an 800 plus cubic inch engine, right? And these truck pullers were like, that's what we got to run. And I said, guys, think about what truck pulling is the most violent thing to an engine. That's like a 20-second dyno pull with the brake loaded. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I said 45, and oh no, we got to have it. And I mean, we saw more detonation and stuff you can shake a stick at, because that fuel is designed for a lighter car, high RPM, not a lot of torque, small displacement, and so it makes power, but it's a finicky deal. So like your guy just said, if you mix a little Q in there with it or vice versa, it stabilizes a little bit. It bumps the octane up a little bit, not knocks some oxygen out of it, but it will still, it's kind of like a Q16 plus,
So Scott McDonald on the Facebook live feed posted about his X275 car, saying he could make the same power with C16 as Q because C16 can, quote, run leaner. Does that make sense to you, the guys who make this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, because, Q16 was definitely not designed for a nitrous application, but what we found is in a jet limited application and NMCA in Nostalgia Pro Street, they used to have, I can't remember if it was a 32 jet or a 36 jet limit. I can't remember what it was, but they had a jet limit. And so what you'd find is that Q16 on motor would pick you up, let's say it was 30 horsepower, right? Well, so why would, and if it didn't detonate and it ran just as fast as C16 or C23, you're giving horsepower away. And they eventually ended up outlawing it, I believe. But in an all-out nitrous application, generally C6 or Q16 isn't the best thing. So Scott's probably correct in the fact that you can run C16 leaner, and then it's going, because you can spray it harder. But if you took a 32 jet and you sprayed C16 with a 32 jet and Q16 with a 32 jet, maxed out the timing, did everything, the Q should be faster. But now if you're spraying a 48 jet and you've got to pull more timing out of the Q, then of course you're not going to go faster. And a quick tangent here, you'll see these comparisons online, and it used to be real bad on YouTube. You'd see these fuel companies that were trying to do unleaded, okay? And they would come out and they'd say, oh, our unleaded is better than C16, on the dyno, blah, blah, blah. But they weren't maxing it. C16 was overkill for it. So of course it'll look better on the dyno. I mean, if you have two engines on motor and you take a 10-to-1 compression engine and you put 100 octane unleaded, it's going to be better than C16, because C16, it burns too slow. There's too much octane, things like that. So you got to make sure you're comparing apples to apples when you see all these comparisons.
So Scott did follow up there, because you were talking nitrous. He says the car on this where he's talking about C16 is actually a turbo, not nitrous, and that's something I'm curious about too. When you start putting boost on it, and on my end, if we're going to go that route, when we start talking smaller bore, so a little background here is I do a lot of drifting, so we're stocking even 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder JZs, SRs, turbo LSs are really typically the biggest thing we're running. When we start talking, especially when you start putting pressure on it, and when you start laying a car on the rev limiter, What's that going to change in what we're looking for fuel? And for me, my gut instinct is I want something that, like you're talking about the tractor pull, that has a little bit more give to it, has a little bit more room, and isn't as sensitive. But I'm curious to hear.
Well, in drifting, I mean, are you going for max engine power, or you're trying to? Is it more consistency to keep the?
It depends.
I mean,
so the more power we're making, the more grip I add to that car, and then we just overcome that grip because we still want a lot of grip because we're still trying to get down the track. So we are standing these things within 200 RPMs of rev limiter. In Texas, with a couple of the drivers I was working with, we were on within 200 RPMs of rev limiter for 90% of the track, and we were still looking for more power. We were dialing in wheel speed at that point because we couldn't get enough grip out of the car. So yeah, we're definitely looking to maximize at least torque and the consistency of the torque throughout the run.
Okay. Well, then here's what you have to look at next. You got to look at the properties of fuel and what you're trying to do. Q16 is a killer boost fuel. I mean, I run it my own stuff. I mean, the quickest twin turbo stuff in drag racing that on gas is on Q. Things like that. But what you have to look at is intake air temperatures. Mm-hmm. All right. If you're running a drift course, and let's say your intake air temperatures are up in the 135, 150 degree range, now you're going to start running into issues where the Q, it doesn't like that. Q16 does not like high air intake temps. C16, it doesn't matter. I mean, I used to run a blow-through carbureted, non-intercooled F2 Pro Charger on a big block Chevy with 30 degrees of timing and 32 pounds of boost. I never detonated the thing once, because it can handle 200 plus degree air intake temp.
Oh, and that's why we love C16.
Right.
But Q, once you start getting above 125 with a lot of boost, 150, it's not your happy fuel anymore.
With C or with Q?
With Q,
okay.
With Q. C16, I don't care. Okay. You can stoke a fire in that crap and it'd be awesome. Yeah. I mean, honestly, this is no BS. C16 is the perfect racing fuel for about 90% of the applications out there.
I'm glad
because it has a low vapor pressure. Okay, so let's say bracket racing. All right, and quickly, vapor pressure. Hot summer day, you open up your gas cap and it goes. That's vapor pressure. Okay, so low vapor pressure means less changes. Why do you think guys like methanol for bracket racing? Methanol has low vapors. Okay, so it stays more consistent. And C16, it's the best bracket racing fuel out there because it will not hardly change. Works great in boosted stuff, non-intercooled. The only time I've seen intercooled blow-through carburetor stuff have issues back in the day before the ignition systems got good, because there's a guy named Tim Husband up in Michigan. And I don't know if you all remember Tim from back in the Turbo Forums days, but
yep.
And he's a tuner now. But Tim used to run a blow-through turbo Mustang, and that thing, he'd get it so cold that it quit firing because he had 40-degree air intake temps. Then the fuel blowing through the carburetor was trying to cool off even more, and it would fire and blow the spark out. And so, but the old C16, it's hard to go wrong with that.
And there's our limit, say, on some of the cars we are running some ice boxes. For the most part, most of our IATs are 100, 120 plus on most of these cars. And C16 has been my gut for the guys that have the budget, which we can get there later. That's the downside of drifting is we are using, 30 to 50 gallons in a weekend. So some guys, that's absolutely possible. So yeah. So on that side, some more and more guys are running ice boxes, and we're seeing some lower IATs. Is a real point where that becomes an issue between the C16 or Q16, because my gut is C16 is so stable, like you said, I know it's going to work unless there's a big problem. I'm okay leaving a little bit of power on the board to keep the engine together because attrition is huge. So
well, absolutely, it sounds like what you're doing. Yeah, exactly. You got to worry about attrition. It's just like the truck puller. You got to worry about that. I mean, yeah, are you losing a little bit of your max power? Sure you are, but at what cost? if you can finish the event and, win, so I think in like what you're doing, I think the C is
Okay.
the way to go. Unless, like I said, unless you can find a way to keep your, air intake temps low, then yeah, because what'll happen is if your air intake temps go high and you're on cue, then you're going to have to start pulling more timing to make it safer. Well, then you're kicking yourself in the butt because you're losing power.
Right.
So,
and then the sensitivity on timing too. That's where, if we can do a little something to keep it safe and we're not going to see the power fall off as hard up there on C. That's my thing is, maybe we're leaving something on the board, but we're also not having this swing in
exactly
power level.
Exactly.
Do you guys see Justin McMurtry's question? Well, we'll get to that next. We'll let Jason finish, but he's got another good one.
No, that's fine.
Well, someone's asking about light ends.
I'm a rambler, man. I'm telling you what. I'm ate up with this. I love racing. I love fuel. Let's not get started about twin turbo Oldsmobiles, because after that it's over. You guys won't ever get a word in edgewise. But like I said, this is why I'm in this business, because I absolutely love the crap out of it.
I think what Justin's getting at here is he's asking about light ends, read vapor pressure. I don't even know what that third metric is, V over L. What? Talk a little bit about those.
What is it?
He said, "What is RVP?" Which I assume is read vapor pressure.
Read vapor pressure. Yep, and that's measured with a gauge. It goes up to I might be off on my tech a little bit, but I think it goes up to 10 psi is the max, 10 or 12. But what you do is you take a sample of fuel, you put it in a test tube, and you put a rubber stopper on it, and then it has a pressure gauge on top of it, and you heat it up to 150 degrees in a water bath, and whatever that pressure gauge says, that becomes your read vapor pressure. That's your RVP. And RVP, generally, and again, I hate to say there's no set exacts. Okay, just like when I was talking about C25. On paper, that stuff should not work in 3,000 plus horsepower, 960 cubic inch nitrous engine. Okay, but it does, because of the changing technology, the changing of how people run things. Things change, and so. But read vapor pressure, generally a higher vapor pressure works better for naturally aspirated applications. That's easier starting. Look in the wintertime, when you look at ethanol percentages in your street gas, they put less ethanol in the wintertime because the more ethanol, it won't fire. So in the summer, you have higher ethanol content usually, and in the wintertime, you have lower. So vapor pressure generally the higher generally works better for a naturally aspirated application. When you talk about light ends of the fuel, light ends are the lightest chemicals in racing fuel. And the way racing fuel is made, there's some that are basic, like your 110s, your basic commodity fuels are, for lack of better terms, it's spruced up avgas with lead and dye. Okay. But the chemical blends, guys call them synthetics, but like what we make, we get chemicals, petroleum-based chemicals from different manufacturers, some in Europe, some in, Houston, and then we get these chemicals and blend them together, and that becomes the different fuel blends. And so some of these chemicals have lighter materials on them, and those are the ones that will evaporate off. Say, we get it all the time. I have a plastic fuel jug. How long will fuel last in my plastic fuel jug? Well, it'll last for a long time, but the light ends and the things that will evaporate out very quickly could be a week to 2 weeks. And think of that as like you're taking a soda and taking the cap off and setting it on the counter. Go drink that soda a week later. It's flat, right? So that's what you're doing to your racing fuel. Your racing fuel, it will still run. That Coke is still going to quench your thirst, but it's not going to give you the Coke kickback where you have the hiccups. You know what I mean? The fizz is gone, and that's what happens when the light ends of fuel evaporate off. And so once those, sometimes I get guys calling me up that have Q16, and they're like, it's fat. It doesn't run like it used to.
Huh.
Well, you know what? When you tell me that you left your drum pump in the drum for 6 weeks, guess what? All your light ends evaporated off. Your oxygen evaporated off. So it's not all gone, but some of it's gone. You know, so
That
Jason,
kind of leads us.
along.
That kind of leads us into
Go ahead,
an-
Mark.
That kind of leads us into a question that Andy Netherland had on Mixler. He asked, "What extra maintenance, if any, is involved with running an oxygenated fuel like Q16?"
Well, I mean, there's a lot of myths, okay, and because of the smell, you smell Q or any of an oxygenated fuel, and you're like, oh man, that's it's got to be corrosive. That is the one that has got me from day one. I've run Q16 in my own stuff since the day we brought it out, okay, and I've never had my fuel pump crap out. I've run billet atomizer injectors from day one. I've never done anything special. You know, the thing with an oxygenated fuel is if you're not going to run for weeks on end, is it better to drain it out of your system or not? I leave it in my system because I want liquid in my hoses and all that stuff. Because when you take, I don't care what fuel it is, when you take the liquid off that hose and you let air get in there, that's what starts hardening things up. You know, I always like to leave liquid in the system. So I take my vent cap and I'll take my vent off and I'll put an AN cap on there and seal the system off. So there's liquid in there. And the thing is, the next time you go out and run, the first couple gallons you're going to fire up and you're going to warm the car up, right? So even if it doesn't have all of the light ends and the oxygen, you know, it's still going to be good to fire, you know, to start the car up with. But as far as maintenance, I've never taken lines off or, you know, the biggest misconception is that it's corrosive. It's not. The chemicals aren't corrosive. The chemicals that are used in there, the oxygenates, are what was used in street gas for 50 years. Okay, so there's nothing different about, you know, the oxygenate. It's just, you know, one other thing is, you know, oxygenated fuels are hygroscopic. They pull moisture. So if you're in a really humid area and your fuel system is vented still, it's going to pull moisture. All right. For instance, a carburetor. I had guys come all the time. Oh, my carburetor is, you know, your fuel ate my carburetor. Well, when you really look at it, if you leave a carburetor with Q16 in it and you leave the vent tubes uncapped, okay, and the fuel evaporates off through the vent tubes, the water stays behind. The moisture that it pulled through those vent tubes stays behind. Well, what does water do to, you know, pot metal or, you know, any of the metals in the carburetor? It oxidizes that white chalky stuff you see in there. If you pull the bowls off, that's from water. That's not the fuel. That's water. So on a carbureted deal, if you're running Q16 or, you know, 113 and you're going to sit for a couple of weeks, take a couple of like vacuum caps, plop them over the vent tubes. You just sealed your system off. You should be fine.
And what little bit goes through the air bleeds into the emulsion wells won't make any difference, or should you really just drain the float?
I mean, if you do that, if you drain the float bowls, my suggestion is to down the vent tubes, put a couple of squirts of WD-40 or, you know, some sort of just something, because once you drain those float bowls, if there was any moisture at all in that, it's going to oxidize your metering blocks and whatnot.
So I noticed that Jeff Stacy is on the call tonight. So are there any other downstream or upstream, you know, we're talking everything from the fuel cell to the pumps to the filters forward. On this show, we talk sometimes about converting to stainless media when running highly ethanol concentrated like E85, because a lot of the cellulose filters aren't happy with that. Are there similar things to think about with the various oxygenated fuels? And we will get to the E85 question in a bit.
Oh, I'm sure we will. You know, I've not really seen anything. I mean, I've not seen anything where you have to have a specific special fuel, you know, filtering system, line construction, anything other than if it will handle methanol. If if it will work with methanol, it's worked with every race fuel I've ever seen. So,
Simple enough.
Personally, in my own stuff, I've run XRP, the lightweight black hose and XRP fittings, and I've never had a liquid problem. I run MagnaFuel, filter, just a regular filter system. They're 10 micron and 100 micron stuff. And I've never had, like I said, I've never had any of my atomizer injectors or anything ever have a problem. So
good.
So
I think sometimes guys really overthink it, and
oh, yeah.
Sometimes I think that kind of bites you in the tush when you overthink it sometimes.
Okay, so got one. Hang on, let me get this one real quick. I know the answer. I just want to hear him say it. My buddy John Beck is on here. He's a land speed guy. They're the ones that have the first Highboy Roadster that went over 300 miles an hour on the salt. He works with Donnie Cummins. I'm sure you know Donnie. But they're asking about a blown gas deal that they're going to run a big old roots blown supercharger on, and he's going to have 225 plus degree inlet air temps, and it's got to be gasoline. What gas do you choose?
Okay. You already know.
I told him C16 all day long, but I just want to hear you say it.
All day long.
I see my favorite fuel. Yep.
The best fuel.
All day long. Yeah, all day long.
I'm sorry, but there's not a better application.
I want to interject on when we were talking about bracket racing and stuff. On the lower compression engines, I really like C12. As far as C12 has been a very consistent, excellent fuel. It's my favorite fuel for anything lower compression.
Oh yeah, C12 is the fuel that Steve Burns in 1974 started walking around the pits at NHRA races in 5-gallon buckets and handing out to guys and saying, "This is better than the aviation fuel that you're running." And that it's the staple. That is what our business is built off of. And you can run C12 and everything from your lawnmower to, light nitrous to everything. So it's a great fuel.
Have you seen the
C12 is the one.
Have you seen the internet memes where the guy says something, he says, "Change my mind"? C12 is the greatest racing fuel that's ever been made. Change my mind.
As long as you're not a turbo.
Exactly.
As long as you're a low compression, naturally aspirated engine, I might agree with that.
Well, shoot. The funny part is, and this is another great one. This is one we get all the time. Well, how much compression will that fuel handle? So you look at our brochures and our pamphlets, right? And you have to always err on the safe side, because if you and the guys and I are talking right now, and I say, you tell me your combo, and you say, yeah, I got a 15-to-1, 585 big block, and I'm shipping at 6,800 RPM. Will C12 work? And if you know how to tune it, I'm going to tell you absolutely, C12 is going to be great. But can I tell everybody that a 15-to-1 big block is going to work on T12? No, you can't, because the next guy that goes out there and puts a 8,500 RPM small block with 15-to-1 compression and a 50 cc chamber, and he burns it to the ground, says, well, your brochure said that it can handle 15-to-1 compression. So of course you got to err on the safe. T12 is probably, like I said, one of the best universal fuels out there, from everything from motocross to bracket racing to like the small nitrous. Not the best blower fuel, you're right, but back in the day, Jim Summers used to mix C12 and C16 50-50. And that's what remember that ProCharge Nova, the orange one they had with the twin blow-through carbs? That's what that thing, when it went to first 8.0, that's what it ran. It was C12 and C16 50-50.
Man, you're going way back with that.
No kidding. This is like late 90s, early 2000s.
I told you I've been around this thing. I've been around this a while.
Yeah, like when the internet started. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, back in the day when Gore started the internet.
Right. So Justin Brumley's got a good question here. Can we talk about MTBE and ETBE? What is that? The methyl and ethyl tetrabutyl.
Right.
What is
tertiary butyl ether?
Yes. Okay, I fucked that up completely. Sorry.
Yeah. MTBE, methyl tertiary butyl ether. That's the product I was telling you that that was in pump gas before ethanol. That was the oxygen in all pump gases until probably I don't remember when it was, mid 80s maybe, something like that. And then the EPA decided that it kills fishes or whatever, and so they had to find something else. But it's got good octane. It's a great oxygenator. It makes power. And that's, one of the products that we use in some of our oxygenated fuels. The issue lies here within is that some states in the United States do not, MTBE is outlawed. It's not legal in the state at all. And so with that being said, you have to look at other options. And ETBE, which is ethyl tertiary butyl ether, which actually has a higher octane number than MTBE, and it is legal in a lot more states. So we've used both of the oxygenates. A few years ago we switched all of our like Q16 stuff, and I'm sure that's where this is coming from. But we did a wholesale change and made Q16 all ETBE, and it smells completely different. So that's, we're all racers. The initial thing was, you fire it up and you're like, whoa, that doesn't smell the same. So something's different. But on, all the dyno testing, everything I did, it all made the same power, but it allowed us to get into other states that MTBE was no longer allowed in. Well, now here in the Midwest, we have states that don't really care. It's an off-road fuel, things like that. So in some of our products, we switch back to the MTBE because it's easier out here. And it's also, the cost went through the roof. And what we were doing as a company, we're eating the costs and not passing them on to the consumer, and if any of y'all are in business, you know how that works. So.
Is that information about what can be sold, where and why available on your website or elsewhere? Because this would be a great way to help people, understand what goes on and some of the questions about this. The person who is speaking right now, this is Bill Fowler. I'm situated in California, where the source of all this pain in the ass stuff comes from. I didn't do it personally, but
which actually, California, you can, as far as I know, you can use MTBE out there. We've also found that like ETBE, it has a better boiling point. So in your motocross fuel, that these guys are out running these motos in the high heat, the tank's right over the engine, and ETBE works better than MTBE. So there's different, different uses for, each chemical. But I don't really, again, I've learned in this business, you don't lie. All right. You don't BS anybody, because as soon as they blow their stuff up and you BS them, then it's a bad deal. So I'm not going to lie to you and say that it is on our website. I really don't know. I've not looked to see if there is something that says what states outlaw, what chemicals, because some outlaw them in street vehicles, but they're okay in off-road fuels, and some it's just a complete ban. I know Colorado and New York. Those are the two big ones I know that MTBE is not legal in.
I can jack my lungs up smoking weed in Colorado, but I can't handle a gallon of Q16.
Hey, don't kill a fish, man.
Lame.
Don't kill a fish.
Probably the same up here in Mass. But on the MTBE subject, and I know Justin Brumley asked this question too. Injectors where they say they're don't run MTBE fuels and stuff like that. Is ETB any better? And just any clarification on that? What really is, how dangerous in that? Is there a line there you can walk?
Well, it's not dangerous. And again, you know what? I probably need to call Paul at Injector Dynamics, because Paul Yaw is the one I talked about years ago with the ID2000s that we found out that MTBE, it swells an O-ring or something that's inside the injector.
Reduces their delivery.
And I talked to him, I said, you sure we can't find a way to engineer this? Well, they're a Bosch injector. And, he's like, dude, they're not going to retool the.
Right. It's
Bosch
that really
isn't going to retool. Yep. Exactly. Where I know there's other companies out there that are offering a high impedance injector that will work with MTBE.
Right. ID, all their X series are MTBE compliant
Compatible,
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
or compatible. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the
And
big
I know
Bosch-
that
yeah, I think it's the CNG derived injectors that are the problem. I think
Correct.
it's what Justin Carpenter just mentioned as well, and that
Yep.
seems to be the real popular like big flow, cheap-ish, budget-friendly
Yep.
injector that everybody's using.
and that's it. And it, like I said, it will swell that O-ring or that pintle valve or whatever the thing is in there. It will swell it in like
Okay.
nanoseconds.
Now is ETB
and-
going to do the same thing?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I mean, just as a, you know, I don't have the full education on it, but there's not a big difference between the two chemicals that I know of. I would have to get with my chemist, and I mean, I can definitely follow up with you on that. But
No, it's all right. I mean, my experience,
you know,
they still do, Brian. We had one here recently in Northwest Arkansas that I was tuning on that we
Right.
used some ETBE oxygenated fuels, and it got weird on us, and we put him in his flow bench right away, and you could literally watch him coming back around as you'd run universal calibration fluid through them, right? So it was literally like cleaning them out, and the O-rings or the whatever it was the seals were unswelling, I guess, but it was kind of funny.
Yeah,
right.
that was my assumption as well.
Is that data
I know
available somewhere, Jason? Because
Do what now?
this is this data on injector compatibility with particular fuels, because that's something else that's come up in this context a number of times.
The manufacturer, the manufacturer of the injectors will tell you that.
Yeah, the manufacturer generally said. I mean, we do put. I believe it says on the top of our cans with the MTBE and our fuels, it says, may not be compatible with all injectors. I think there's some things like, or it might be in our brochure, that says things like that. It says may not be compatible with all high impedance injectors. Because like I said, I mean, we want to be good partners in the performance industry and not say, yeah, run our stuff in that, and then you burn your shit stuff to the ground. And so, I mean, but I know there, like you said, there are other options out there. Seems to be getting better. I know that I've talked to Jack and Bill at Atomizer. He's got a body and everything, and he's talked about bringing out a high impedance, MTBE, ETBE compatible injector.
Which makes a lot of sense. Is it time to turn to the big cornfield in the room here?
Oh, come on! I don't. Come on,
The love of ethanol.
You know what? I'm in a hotel in Huntsville, Alabama, and I don't have enough beer to deal with this one.
Oh man!
Because you want to know what ethanol is good for? Drinking, and that's
I tried to.
I felt like.
Are you lumping Race 85 in with that too? Or?
I tried to warn you about this, Pooch. I told you it was going to be easy to come.
Oh, you know what? What's funny is after I was going back and forth with you, and I said, I'm just going to get blasted on this one. I know it's coming because I'm not gonna BS you at all. You got to think about it when the E85 craze came in, okay, and I'm going to say it was more when we first really started seeing it was more in the bracket race and stuff, and the guys that were just dabbling in the boosted things. Hey, you know what? Do you go to the pump at the time and pay $1.40 for a gallon of this stuff that will work, or do you pay $12 a gallon for C16? I mean, I'm not a dum dum, and I've got 5 kids at home with Kyla, and I know what this stuff costs, so I do understand that. But you have to, in my mind, you have to go, all right, the guy that was wanting to look at buying 110 for the cheapest 110, going to the pump and buying the Citgo 110, he's the guy that switched to E85. Was that a VP guy to begin with? Probably not, and so, but, where I get into, and we've done it. Look, we've got ethanol performance fuels. I mean, we were pretty steadfast for a long time. I mean, but the business is there. We understand that people that's what they want to do. My bone of contention is I'm a performance guy. I'm a hot rod guy. I want the most power for what I'm doing. Okay. And if I have the choice between Q16 or E85 in my all billet twin turbo LDR car, on paper, it's going to make more power on Q16. So I want that. But that's me.
So, Jason, the other side of this conversation, though, is there's a lot of people, tuning, new, stock performance stuff, Coyote Mustangs and LT2 or LT1 GM products, and said, hey, we can get, 20, 30, 40 more horsepower by running E85 instead of pump gas. And while I realize this isn't, exactly what you're here to talk about, can you help our audience that's looking at those things understand a little bit more about what these pros and cons are?
Well, I mean, I don't want to get on. Honestly, I don't want to get on a bash E85 stuff or bash ethanol stuff and blah blah blah, because they all have their purposes and they all have their customers. Okay, and like you were saying, you got a guy that's running a newer late model car on 93 pump gas, or he can put it on pump E85 and pick up 30 or 40 horsepower. All right. Great. If that's what you want to do. But again, you guys know, all right, I just took my thing off 93 pump gas and I put it on E85. So now if I'm trying to drive this car, I've just cut down my drivability or my distance driving, 3/4, because, because the stuff burns. And what is it? A 2-to-1 or
it's like
1.38. 1 and 3/4 to 1 to 1 ratio, something like that ish. Okay. So now you got to make sure that you either have, jugs of pump E85 with you, otherwise, or, and what we're seeing is the government subsidies are going away. You're going to start seeing less and less E85, especially once you start seeing, E15 at the pumps all the time, so that part is going to go away, I do believe. But then you're going to have more of the performance E85, like what we have, and other companies. But then it comes back to the whole thing. Okay, do I want to pay $7 a gallon for performance E85, or do I want to pay $2 a gallon for it? But where we come back at it is any ethanol, methanol, anything, it's just like an oxygenated fuel. It's hydroscopic. It pulls water, pulls moisture. The pump stuff, of course, you all know this. You've got to be very careful on testing it and everything, because you don't know what you're going to get out of the pump every time. And as with, I think there are more issues with, and it's not corrosiveness, it's pulling the water. You're going to pull more moisture with an ethanol or a methanol. So if you don't have maintenance on your fuel system, you're going to run into issues like that. But again, as the market develops and more guys are going to an ethanol-based fuel, the aftermarket and the manufacturers, they're stepping their games up too. So, it isn't like the old, where 10 years ago you went, oh God, don't run the 85 because, it'll crumb up your whole carburetor and fuel system and your fuel lines will fall off. And they would go, you're right, Chicken Little, the sky's falling, it's over, and now it's not like that. I mean, there's a market for it. And I'm sure you guys see it in the tuning world. I mean, there is,
We do. As tuners, we just like C16 because we get somebody started and send them out the door. And if they have hiccups or mistakes or something else, the C16 is the forgiving fuel, in all cases.
It is, but you know what? The hard part is, and again, like I said, I go back to this whole deal. I got kids at home and, mortgages like you guys all do. And so if you can go have your fun, if you can go to the drag strip or the racetrack or to the street night or whatever, and you can do it for $2 a gallon, or you've got to go spend $16 or $17 a gallon. I mean, I get that. I understand that part of it, where I look at it is like I said, I'm that performance guy. I want that that guy to have the most power. I want him rolling out of there. I mean, I'm sorry, but we race dynos all the time. You want to have that, and so there are other products out there that will make more power. You know,
Okay.
if you give me an E85 car, you know, we're going to find something that will make more power, but at what expense? You know?
So next question, and it's a good transitional one, talking about alcohol. Why are all the guys in Radio versus the World running methanol? It was one of the questions somebody asked.
Because you get
at what point do you switch from C and Q over to methanol, and what are the reasons most guys are doing that?
well, like, okay, and that's a great legit question, because when you're running Radio versus the World, or you're running that type of a boosted combination where you have unlimited boost, gasoline can't keep up. Okay, no racing hydrocarbon fuel can take that kind of boost and cylinder pressure and not detonate. It's a fact. It can't happen. Okay, in a class like mine, a limited drag radial, all right, we're limited to an 88 millimeter turbo and whatnot. So an 88 millimeter turbo on alcohol, most combos will make about 52 to 55 pounds of boost, let's say, in a all billet big block Chevrolet. All right, on Q16, you'll make about 40-ish, 42 pounds. Okay, but they run the same. Look at the mile an hour. You don't have a methanol guy running any different than a, Apple. It's because in a limited boost situation or a limited turbo, there's no power difference. I would tell you all day long in a limited drag radial. I mean, the quickest cars in the class right now, the quickest turbo cars, your Paul Gargas, your Shane Stack, your Justin Martin, they're all on Q16. Dan Ferris ran when he went a 410 on methanol with his 481X, but that thing only made 55 pounds of boost. Now you take that same combo and put 98 millimeter turbos on it, that 481X, and you make 75 pounds of boost. It's going to fly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to just it's methanol, because you're running 2 to 1 on the volume. It can handle the latent heat of vaporization is so much higher. It can handle that boost, and that's why they're all running methanol. I mean, they have to. There's no, you can't do it once. And I don't want to give it a limit, because I've seen other things, but generally, once you see about 50-ish pounds of boost on Q16, that's about it. That's about where, you got to start being real careful on, maybe pulling another degree of timing and all that. So you've plateaued there, so.
This is another, you've raised, Jason, another sort of example of where application, engine type, what class the engine is running, those sort of things are guidelines about what fuel you would want to pick ideally, because all of us that are building combinations for I'm one of these idiot big block NA guys that runs drag week, so we're our own little sickness. But
sure,
a lot of other people, are running other combinations, and so they're looking at where do I want to be. And as you'll gather, the RealTuners crew as a whole defaults for C16 for
sure.
most of the applications is the right place to be for the boosted stuff and all of that. Again, is there a place where people can look at and think about, for me personally, I've built pump gas motors for all these years to run drag week because it was simpler. I could drive anywhere, and if it was east of the Mississippi, I could get 93 because I'm building a 91 pump gas car. But for a lot of people, they're looking at other combinations and other things to see how much can I squeeze out of it to remain competitive. So the brochure, and I remember picking up one recently at an event, kind of generally talks about things, but is there a further resource that people can look at, or a tech line, or how do they talk to VP about, hey, this is where I'm headed, or this is what I'm trying to do? What really is the right fuel?
Well, the coolest part about about VP is that we have got a phenomenal tech staff. I mean, and I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I mean, I can help you guys. Our general tech line, which you can go on our website and on vpracingfuels.com and look up. It goes to Tom Henriot, who Tom is one of my best friends, and I got him the job at VP 20 years ago when I started. And he's a gearhead, and I mean he can talk to you and get you right in line too. And then one of our other tech resources, who is he is actually our head of R&D and tech. His name's Freddie Terza, and his number's on there also. Freddie's based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and Freddie was he built one of Kevin Harvick's Daytona 500 winning engines, the Terry Labonte's. I mean, he worked in NASCAR for years, and I mean, he is just a wealth of knowledge. I mean, so we've got gearheads. We have racers that are our tech guys. They're not somebody sitting behind a desk reading a brochure. So I mean, that's our best resource to have is call us.
So the answer is call you guys, ask the questions, be honest about the application, what you're doing, how fast the car is, the weight, the power, all that stuff, and really do a good job of matching fuel to use. And then you'll get that happy result of making everything work. Right.
Yeah. And the coolest part is we're all, like I said, we're all hot rodders. We're all into this. So 90% of the time we know what we want. We already know our answer, but we just want that reaffirmation from the guy on the other line, we all are just ate up with this. We just love it. I mean, that's the coolest part. Most of the management staff and VP are all like, they're all racers. They race some sort. And we've got motocross racers. We've got off-road racers, our company is built off of racers, and that's, we understand, the need to have that information and to have, the resources there to help you out,
I think everyone appreciates that. So, as you know, we've got a crawl of pictures coming across for people that are on at least Facebook or the YouTube channel. Unfortunately, the Mixler guys don't get to see that. But a lot of these pictures show you on top of a cart spraying a track. And I think we'd love to talk a little bit about track prep and all that. But I have a question first.
Sure.
Is that a PRS McCarty or a Custom 24?
Yes.
Which one?
It's the quilt top. It's kind of a solid, kind of a trans gold finish quilt top looking thing.
That's a 90. Which one is that? That's my 97 Custom 22 10 top, and I found that at a pawn shop on eBay in Los Angeles. I got it for $1,500.
No!
Shit.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's crazy, man. You guys out in LA get all the damn pawn shops with the good stuff.
I couldn't believe it. That was, and you know what? No one was hitting up on it. I mean, that was one of them deals. I did it offline, and it has everything. It's got the original case. It's got the card. That is my, But I mean, if you ever want to get into it offline, I've got an '86 PRS Custom 24. It was the 720 ever made it to the new factory.
Oh man,
yeah. You're talking to a couple of musicians
I could geek out on that shit all night long, bud.
And I've got a '64 L Series Strat too.
Ooh,
right on. Yeah, I saw that. I didn't want to overdo it on the guitar pictures.
You're going to get the boys excited. You start talking about a 64 Strat.
I know.
They're going to be wound up all night, and this conversation is going to go to 3 a.m.
Off the rails.
Hey, you know what? It's cars and guitars. You know what I always
cars
said?
And guitars.
I said the guitar brought them in. I said back in the day, I said with the women, I said the guitar brought them in, the car drove them away.
Well,
I like it.
Well, speaking of the car, I want to touch on this for a little bit because I haven't seen you out this year. So
I haven't been out in 2 years.
I know, man, and you've got probably, for all the G-Body fans on, what's sitting in Jason's garage right now. So
it's close. I burned it up in October of 17 at Ducks Race.
Or not. Can we talk about this a little more? What is sitting in his garage? Because I don't know.
I've got it. All right. So I was talking about my first car. I've got an 82 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. That was the first car that my dad bought me in 1990 when I was 16 years old. And it is the only car that I've ever I know nothing else. If you brought me an F body, I wouldn't know what to do with it. If you brought me a Chevelle, I wouldn't know. But you know what? I can tell you every metric nutter bolt on an 82 Cutlass, here to there. And this is the only car I've ever worked on. Like I said, it started as a 16-second car, and it's morphed throughout the years. Like I said, I bracket raced for years. Then we got into True Street, is what OSCA's class was called, and then we got into drag radial, which was the Donald Long stuff, and so it's a limited drag radial car. And the last engine was a 557-inch 12-degree headed big block Chevrolet with twin Precision 88s on it on Q16. And I've been as quick as a 418 at 187. And the car stock suspension, 295 tire, 3,325 pounds. It's still got roll-up windows. I mean, it's got a bolt-on hood, a bolt-on trunk.
I finally got a picture of it up here. Go ahead.
Yeah, it looks like a street car, other than the wing on the back. So I burned it up at Donald's race 2 years ago in October, and I decided it was time to just bite the bullet. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I didn't expect it to take 2 years, but I worked a program out with Bandit Energy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with energy manufacturing at all, but I got their first billet block. And I worked the program with them and Tony Bischoff. And so BES is building my new engine, and it will be done in 2 weeks. And it's a all billet 14.5-degree headed big block Chevrolet with the Vizner intake, with the whole smear deal.
All the goodies.
So
I can't wait to see it.
All the goodies.
I miss seeing the old girl out at the racetrack.
The old Slowsmobile. Look. This is the last hurrah, because if this doesn't go down, then I'm pretty well done. But yeah, TRZ, they did me a really nice floater rear end. M&M Mark Mickey, we redid the transmission and put one of his shifters in there, and then the car's actually going to Pro Tree to Andy, to Pro Tree race cars here Tuesday to finish I don't know if you've seen TRZ's conversion on the front stuff for the G bodies and the S10s, where you can cut the frame out and put the coil over completely through the like stacked subframe type deal. The deal where it actually it bolts to the A arm and then it welds across. You can just put an actual coil over through it so you don't smash.
Oh yeah.
Against the bottom,
the spring pocket deal.
The spring pocket deal type deal.
Where it eliminates the spring pocket, and you can run an eyelet top coil over.
Yep, that's it. And so, Andy's going to do that. I got Mentzer's building me some canister front shocks for it. And
four ways? Did you get the fancy ones? Did you get the four ways?
No, stock suspension in the rear. He's had the four ways really. I've just got a 6-inch stroke canister in the rear, and then like I said, we're going to do a canister in the front, which is kind of different to control the extension on it a little bit better.
Nice.
Because that was the issue I was having. The thing would try to wheelie down the whole track, and so with maybe slowing that front end, being able to slow the front end down, it should help it some more. And but yeah, it's going to Andy at Pro Tree, and the engine I get, Tony said 2 weeks. Then we're building new headers for it. So then I'm going to go to Joe Plasky and throw it up on his hub dyno up at Hyperactive. And I hope to be ready for February and back at it, because I missed the racing side of it. Now, I'm sure you followed along Facebook. A couple years ago, we did buy a bracket car that Kyla drove a lot more than I did. But
now listen. All I remember about this, and I love Kyla. Kyla and I have been friends. I mean, I know you because you guys got together and all of that. But I have to say, when it comes to you and her, I'm on Team Kyla. And when she takes the car bracket racing and she whoops your ass and
all day long
and drops you like an oak tree on the tree, I have to chuckle.
You know what the best part is? Everyone's like, "Oh, she'll drive the hot rod." It's the seat's welded in. She can't even come close to touching the pedal. So
lucky.
You're not going to make seat mounts for her to get in the big car. Man, that's
no.
Oh, that's cold.
Hey, you know what? She's a great crew chief. That's where and I bought, like I said, I bought a car for her to race and get her feet wet and all that stuff. And we only got to race 6 times this year, which kind of stunk. But so next year we're going to bring the big hot rod out. And the problem, not a problem, but we got 5 kids between us, and our kids are between 12 and 7, and they are all involved in stuff. And so next year's going to be interesting because 2 years ago, she went every race. Like if we had to leave on a Tuesday, we all left on a Tuesday, right? Well, now the kids are all involved in stuff. It's going to be, I told her she better get real used to flying in on a Friday night and getting picked up at the airport.
You're gonna have to get a 2-car trailer and take her so she can run open comp while you run LDR.
Oh, you know what? If she wants to do it, it's all up to her. That's she's I'd tell you what, one of the most fun times I had was at the prize fight a couple years ago, and I was announcing and whatnot and running the event and helping everybody. And she was running the car herself. I mean, I wasn't even down there. She would just pull up, do the burnout, and then she got down to 3 cars down there against all those guys in Louisville, and I'll never forget, it was Bohannon, Charlie Bohannon. He said, who's that driving that car? I said, my fiance. And he goes, how long she been racing? I said, about 6 weeks. And he goes, no way. And she was just doing it.
Dude, listen, she is deadly on a tree. Y'all just don't even understand because I've seen her post some of the pictures and stuff from where she y'all taking the car out, and that one race where y'all took it out and both of you made passes in it. And the one she posted her time slips up against yours, man. I was almost slightly embarrassed for you, just a little bit. I mean, you can tell you're a heads up guy.
Oh, I am. You know what? The best part about heads up, you let go of that button, you close your eyes, and you get to the end and throw that chute and hope to God it all went good. Well, I want to hear more about this land speed deal. Because we were out there. This was the first year that VP was the fuel of Bonneville.
Yeah, you were the fuel at Speed Week, right? Which was, I mean, I was fine the last 14 or 13 years I've been going out there, but I'm comfortable with VP with certain fuels. And, man, a whole bunch of my guys, it was C16 is what you're sealing up with.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, now the car I worked on, we didn't have a good Speed Week. It was a Streamliner. We didn't take it out. But we took it out here 2 weekends ago at World of Speed, right?
Okay, World of Speed.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, which was, now I think the other guys were still out there doing fuel for this one. I don't think VP did the World of Speed. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can't remember. No, we just did Bonneville.
Yeah,
and
the big event. Yeah, this was Utah Salt Flats Racing Association puts it on, but the safety, the rules, and all the records. If you run a record there, it's a Bonneville record. So
okay,
that's why a lot of our guys go. Well, the salt conditions were quite a bit better. They weren't great, but they were good enough that we were able to nab. The car I worked on was, I'm sure you're familiar with the Dortons. Jeff and Keith Dorton built a 304.
Oh, absolutely.
They did a 304 cubic inch small block, all motor, and put it in the very updated version of the Vesco, the original Vesco Streamliner that debuted in 1957. So Joe Timney at Delaware Chassis Works, a frequent host on our show also, he's not here tonight, but he went through and modernized everything on this car. And I mean, of course, he'd still like to change some things, but I mean, it's got really good suspension on it now. It ended up, it looks like it worked really good on this rough course, but we managed to pull off, so far from my research, we are the only car to set a record in all of 2019 over 300 miles an hour. The next one is George Fields. Yeah, it's been a rough conditions year. So, Poteet and those guys made faster passes, but they didn't set any records. They couldn't get near their record speed, mid 400s, but as far as actually setting records, so far it looks like Blakely and Vesco's car is the highest record set this year for a car. I didn't look at the motorcycle records yet because there's a bazillion of those.
I don't know about motorcycle records either, Scott, but I talked with some of the guys at Gear Grinders. That's the club I'm in.
Yes.
And you guys are it.
Yeah. Which and I don't know if that's that's just like a pat on the back thing or whatever. But we did a video. Did you get to see the video, Jason? If not, you should scroll down on my Facebook. There's a bazillion copies. I did a telemetry in-car video of our guy Bob Blakely driving. You talk about, and everybody should go look at this on YouTube. It's under RealTuners. Bonneville, it's my most recent video, or second most recent. But you watch this guy driving this car, and people who are like, yeah, Bonneville, you just get in and floor it. Bullshit. This thing's getting sideways at 250 miles an hour. And Bob, it was affirming to watch that video even for the rest of our team. Because they're like, well, how's your driver? Is your driver, does he know what he's doing? Dude, look at his shift points. He hits the shift points within like 40 and 50 RPM every time. And that car is bouncing around like crazy. You can tell that's bouncing by looking out the window at the horizon. Look at the mountains, against the framework of the windshield, and you'll see how much that car's swaying. And I put a lateral accel and a steering angle gauges in there so you can see how much he's correcting. And that
was really interesting. Was there a crosswind? Because you're looking at the steering angle going down the track the whole time.
There was
anybody who is interested in what it means to go really fast and what you have to do. This video is awesome.
Yes. So there was it was pretty much the crosswind component was like 10 miles an hour from the right, pushing to the left, which is why his steering is cocked to the right. Everybody is, because I've got the previous one, there was no wind and it was straight, and everybody's like, oh, did something twist up on the steering? I'm like, no, that's the crosswind blowing on this thing. He's got to cock the steering wheel, a good 20, 25 degrees to the right just to go straight. And then what happens is the wind will pick up and it'll grab the tail and it'll do, it's like a weather vane. It wants to point the nose into the wind, so he's got to kind of crab steer it a little bit to keep it going between the markers so he doesn't get off the course. And I mean, shit, the first one's at 120 miles an hour, then at like 250, it hits, gets him sideways, and you can see the lateral accel, and he's cranking the steering over to keep it straight, and he keeps balling up until the last mile. We ended up averaging, on the last pass, 314 miles an hour. We went out the back door at 322.6 on the GPS.
Yeah, you know what I say about that? F that.
Listen, you aren't lying.
That's crazy.
So,
that's crazy.
Two other cars out there. One, Lee Cecilia. Everybody's familiar. I've got pictures all over the place. I worked on the original crew for the first 7 or 8 years on this car. He had a 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona. He has 2 of them that he races at Bonneville. If you've been there, you've seen these cars. They're some of the nicest cars ever out there and some of the best performing. Well, for years, he owned production class records, and he was racing against OEMs, right? And he would go, that's the class that GM will come out and race in a couple times a decade, and smash a record up or whatever. But anyway, very competitive. He built a turbo car. He had Ryan Fain build a turbo car, and the whole thing from the build-up was driver safety. Well, long story short, this gorgeous car went around backwards. It hit something in the course, blew a tire is that's the tentative report. It's nothing official yet, but hit something in the course, went around backwards, and then they're telling me it had 30 feet of air under the car. It flew up so high in the air. And then it did endos and pirouettes. Look, I measured the wreckage was scattered for 1.2 miles, right? That this thing was wrecking and flipping and tossing. I don't know if it was flipping that whole direction. That whole length, it had to be pretty close. But, and the only thing that happened to Lee was he busted his hip because he didn't have the modernized containment seat or the fill or whatever. Ryan didn't like the seat, but he was completely conscious, pissed off, obviously, because the car was just completely destroyed. But the cockpit of the car, there's a little bit of a bend in a tube, nothing bad. All 8 fire bottles in this car stayed in place. One of the brackets broke, but the other one held it. And they told me that it looked like if he had to, he could have set the fire extinguishers off even after he was done crashing, if he would have needed to. I mean, he literally landed right in their lap. Someone was there by the time the wreckage came to a stop. But anyway, just horrible crashes in that. And then also the carbonite streamliner, Rob Freivogel, who is currently in ICU in Salt Lake City, getting it worked out, though. They said he doesn't look like he's got permanent damage. He's just got swelling on the brain. But another wreck out there, and the conditions were weird this year, I guess. But we were fortunate to snag a record.
But the bottom line is the human body isn't really made to deal with accidents at 300 miles an hour and the forces involved. It doesn't matter, if everything else is contained and everything else happens. It's like, people aren't built for that shit.
Yep.
but it's a testament to the car builders that they stayed together. They did everything they were supposed to do. We had that question posted earlier about fuel, and one of the things that he had said is they start out with an inlet air temperature of, what was it, 80 degrees and end up at 225.
John Beck,
back to that, John Beck, that fuel selection question, which came back to the
on
C16.
a roots blown deal, or a PSI or a screw blower or something.
Roots,
There's nothing. There's no other fuel out there. I don't care what company. There's nothing out there that is going to work other than C16 in that. It's not going to happen. I mean, the 220. That will. C16 is the only thing that I know of that will withstand that without detonating.
Yep. Scott, you've got better records than almost anybody I've seen on this. The typical 5-mile course Bonneville run, how long are these cars at wide open throttle?
We were wide open in the yellow car for 89 seconds. That was after the push off. So you could say some of them are as long as like Cecilio's production car would be on there 180 seconds, or 160, almost 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
And that's,
and we've got the Mata J6 on the call tonight who run the standing miles, and a lot of guys who've, won the hot rod event standing mile. And those guys are still up in that range because the terminal speeds are much lower, 200, 228. Michael, correct me, of course. But the bottom line is you've got these long-term lot deals where IATs inevitably rise, whether it's a turbo or NA or something like that. And so this goes back, Jason, to my original question about, our best source is to talk to you guys about this is what we see, this is what our application is, this is how we run. How do we get a fuel for maximum performance? And I keep repeating this because there's so much myth out there. There's so much crap on the internet, and we're trying to help people via this podcast make a good decision early in their process.
Well, and the thing is, like I said, if you talk to us, we've heard all the stories from everybody. I mean, you might get on a forum, or you might get on put a thing on Facebook or whatever and say, hey, what do you guys think? And of course, you're going to get 100 opinions. Well, I mean, we've dealt with it. We've heard it. We've talked to the race. We've talked to everybody that, the guy that's done the crazy shit, the guy that's, doing this. I mean, so we have a pretty good base to go off of when you call us,
Yep. Just by reference alone.
You can, I mean, just by, like I said, myself 20 years, Tom Henry at 20 years, Freddie Terz, I think is at 12 or 13 years with VP. And like I said, he's been involved as an engine builder and with NASCAR since, the 80s. So, I mean, we've got, just crazy amounts of knowledge. So, I mean, we hope that with, our 80 different blends, we can get you into something.
I actually have a little, sorry, it's both tuning related and fuel related. And Scott, I know you've talked about this a little bit on the salt flat cars and stuff like that. You tend to be running them a little bit richer than you would on other cars because of how long you're on wide open throttle. Is that right?
Correct. And it's the data I've been able to observe, in the lab environment is that really it's the chamber temperatures that drives that. And you get a faster burn, so you pull some timing out and run it a little fatter to get control of the burn. That's what I do anyway. It seems to work.
Yeah. So on that note, because that's one conversation we've had when I've been wondering about fuels on drifting. We're not quite as long, but we are wide open throttle. Like I said, sometimes 40 to 60, 70 seconds during a run near rev limiter. So we're dumping fuel too, but trying to keep it kind of rich for the sort of the same reasons. Would that change the fuel recommendation you would have, especially if we start talking more? I'll call them budget friendly guys that are looking at running maybe a Race E85 or a 110 lead,
right.
And where you would go on that, and concerns on one fuel versus the other, or how that would change your recommendation.
Again, a lot of it depends on the inlet temps. Whether it's and also whether it's NA, whether it's turbo. Whatever. I don't know. I think the more you're building heat in the chamber,
You know, the more likely you are to need, the more
need more
detonation resistant
you're gonna
fuel.
Need some sort of detonation resistance,
Right.
because, like you said, the more that you're on the throttle for, you know, the longer period of time and whatnot. And then you got to target, you know, like if it's NA, you know, are you targeting 13.3, you know, as your you know, main, you know, air fuel ratio, or you know, if it's turbocharged, are you know, targeting, you know, 12-1? You know, personally, you know, I found in my own stuff that seems like the fatter that I run it out back without, you know, fouling anything, it actually goes faster. I've been quicker at 10.8 than 12.1.
Yeah.
You know,
Awesome.
With the turbo deal. But the Pro Charger, now I will tell you, back Pro Charger days, it like 12.3, but the turbo likes fatter than it out. So, you know, it's a different, you know, a different animal. But yeah, it depends on, you know, like you said, how long you're on that throttle. If you're on it for, like you said, 60 seconds, I mean, I would think you're going to have to target a fatter air fuel ratio,
Right.
because you're going to get to a point where, like you said, your air temps are hot, you know, everything is, you know, your water temp's going up, everything.
You can tell we're all drag racers, and even the drifters have kind of the same thought. But I'll tell you what, on this car that I tuned here at the Salt Flats and did all the telemetry on, that engine came from the Dortons. They're building stuff to go 500 miles at wide open throttle. So they know what timing it's going to work.
Guys.
Yeah, they're literally targeting a temperature. They try and leave at the temperature that ends up going out the back door at 220 or 210 to 220, and we finally nailed it in the last two passes. You know, and so they know, hey, we need it to run for the last mile.
You tune off of that 220.
Yep.
That's what you know, that's your, and so like if you're talking with the drifting, if you know that car is going to be running at, you know, your operating temperature is 200, then you tune for that.
Sure.
Even for the long, you know, full throttle 60 seconds.
Yeah. And I mean, these guys are giving me timing numbers for wide open for a long time, you know, and it's kind of funny, you know, they tell me, well, shit, you're only going a couple miles, you know, wind it up to 9,600 if you need to. It'll last long enough, you know, but if you take it to 98, you know, and you're making power at 98 and it's not an accident or whatever, then you might want to start looking at valve springs every time, you know, between runs. But that was the instructions
I couldn't imagine it, like you said, but again, if it's based off a NASCAR deal, then shit, they don't care. I mean,
they know what they're doing.
Springs are they know what it's going to do for 500 miles. So what's 90 seconds going to do?
Yeah.
Right?
No, I'll tell you what the dumbest part of it. The tuning was easy out there. The shit that really got under my skin was I couldn't figure out why I could make the thing start and run perfect and just great manners on the engine dyno. You know, they even commented, wow, this thing, it pulls from a lower RPM. It's happier on the EFI. Cool. We get out to the Salt, and I get the thing in the pits, starts up and runs fine, takes throttle. Ooh, look at me, NASCAR engine tuner, you know. We get up to the start line where the goddamn National Geographic people are there, like the whole film crew, and their drones are flying around and shit. And the fucking car won't start. Or it starts and it dies. Starts and it dies. Starts and it dies. Literally, they almost gave up on the first run. Like, we're done here. And then he tried it again and it lit. I'm like, what the shit is going on? We'd take it back to the pits. I'd plug the laptop in. We'd start it back up and the thing would run perfectly. I wouldn't touch it. So I'm like, is this thing losing fuel pressure? What the fuck's going on here?
You got voodoo. You got voodoo tune up. You got voodoo.
So we went back to the start line the second time. Same shit. It did the startup weirdness every time. I didn't figure out until the very end. If you look at the air intake.
Salt?
No, it's the damn air. It's the air scoop. In the pits, we take the lid off. We start the motor up. It's just got a tunnel ram hanging out with dual quads in the fresh air. But you put on the lid. It's an air box that's got a very small inlet, and what it does is we have a pressure sensor in there. You can literally see it acting like a map sensor. It becomes an intake plenum. When you start the motor and blip the throttle, it sucks the air out of that thing. The car's not moving. It's not getting a 200 mile an hour blast of air into that duct, right? So the fucking thing draws a vacuum inside the air box when it's running, and it completely changes the tune. You see it on both the map sensor, so you end up with a different load or different vacuum per a given throttle position. It makes it, long story short, it makes it dip into fat whenever it's drawn a vacuum, right? So I didn't figure it out until the end. How did I fix it? You know what I did? Did you watch?
Well, yeah. I mean,
I started it for him with my hand on the throttle. Right,
I was watching the video when you stuck your arm in there. I just get a leaf blower and stick it on the inlet of the air.
Right.
Of the air.
Oh, that's a good idea. No, it was funny because I'm doing live feeds because we podcast or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, it's gonna start this time on the live feed, and it's like, and then it dies, and of course the driver can't hear the engine. Okay, he is so strapped in. He's wearing fire suit over. He's got earplugs that are the communications. So he doesn't hear the motor, and he can't see the tach when he's laying down. So he can't tell if it's running or sitting on the rev limiter. He's afraid to sit there and stab the throttle. So anyway, I got to where I'd reach down his leg and hit the throttle with my hand, get it lit, and run and warmed up. And once it would stabilize on pressure in that airbox, it would stay running. Everything was cool, and he could take off. But I mean, it fell on its face the first time. I was literally out there just like, I'm just gonna cut my wrists out here. I'm looking like an idiot.
You're like, I'm the tuner. I'm the tuner.
Yeah. Oh, you should have heard the shit these guys are giving me. But what was cool was in the end, the hero moment was in our qualifying pass. We were doing really good. We were fast enough to set the record, but our terminal speed was 20 some miles an hour less than our average. Which, what's that mean? That means it slowed down at the back door, and everybody thought, great, they burnt the engine up again just like last year. Isn't that what we hired a fucking tuner for? And I'm just like, oh shit, what happened? What happened? So I've got my video going, but I'm out there running my fingers up the exhaust and stuff, and everything looks okay. Smells a little bit like coolant, but that seems normal. It ended up being that the chutes deployed early by themselves. Something in the relay box. We went back to the impound, and I knock on the relay box, and it's like, the damn chute deployer thing goes, well, it also shuts off the ECU and the data logger. So so Wade Brown and Miller, his team did the wiring and the plumbing. I get him on the phone. We get the schematics out. I do brain surgery on one of the main chassis harnesses there to bypass this stuff. Driver pulls the chutes manually. Everything's good, and we ended up doing good in the end. But the tuning part wasn't the hero part. I actually looked stupid on the tuning. It was the rewiring and bypassing the automatic chute deployment that ended up being
you found out that the automatic chutes were deploying at 4.8 miles.
So exactly, 4.81, and what else they were doing? They were both deploying together, and he was hitting over 3 Gs of deceleration.
Oh, that must have been entertaining.
And then I'm like, did you not notice? Did you not say anything? He's like, well, it fucking slows down in a hurry, but it goes straight. That's what the driver told us.
He didn't realize that his hands and his feet were like floating as it.
Right. Until I got the video out, and I'm like, wait a minute, look at this rear-facing video. It does both chutes on the first hit, and I mean, it keeps the car straight. I'll tell you that.
In the video, he was like, I think the chutes deployed. How did he not know for certain?
No, he knew they deployed. He didn't know they deployed together. So normally what you got is a small chute that deploys from 300.
They normally deploy sequentially. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can't see the tack. How does he know the chutes are out?
Right. Yeah. Just by feel.
How does he shift if he can't see the tack? Just
He's got a big old shift light, courtesy of Holly.
Okay.
So I ended up rigging up a giant bright shift light.
Looks like a 70s disco in there when he goes to shift.
Exactly. Exactly. No, I rigged up a shift light that he's going to see. Right. And it's funny. He did. Once we got that right, man, it was the whole weekend. Every pass was in 40 or 50 RPM of target. And I mean, it's bouncing around so much because it's like traction, no traction, traction, no traction every 5 feet. The motor's just bouncing all over RPM.
Out of curiosity, is the shift light triggered at the same amount of time before the actual shift needs to happen? Or do you vary when the shift light hits? Because if you're doing a 1-2 shift, when you need to see the light to hit the shift on the number is very different than it's a like 4th gear to 5th gear or
it's a little
whatever.
Slower motion. It's not like the Frank Holly. I bet you guys have covered that in Frank Holly school. I bet. I mean, but it's not like that at here. First to second is like, holy shit, just get it in a gear that it'll hook in. So he hit the number. We didn't care so much because he's not hooked up. It's like, well, just work the throttle enough until you feel acceleration on your body that, you're actually getting the chassis up to speed. So if you look at the throttle position, he's barely cracked. So no, we don't treat it that critically, I guess is my answer there. But there's just so much else to worry about, like getting him off the push truck. Watch my live stream videos. We're pushing him off, and I'm watching the mile per hour for the driver of the push truck, calling it out. When we hit 45, that was the bravest we got because the Streamliner is actually a lightweight car, which is very rare out there. It's not heavy. It's like a 2,900 pound car, 2,800 pounds, something, I think is what they told me, under 3,000. But and so it's squirrely pushing it down the course, and you can easily jackknife that rig. So drivers focused on keeping the car straight. The push truck guy is focused on staying straight with the car, and I'm telling him the mile an hour, and then he gets on the intercom and says, "Hey, 45 mile an hour, go. Let the clutch out, drop the throttle. It should go." So, and it did. I mean, we got the process figured out. What's funny is you get all your sequences and processes and steps and your outline to a successful pass where everybody's shit's working, the thing automatically sets a record. You know what I mean? It's just things happen right when everything's taken care of, when your checklist is all checked off and drivers shifting at the right time and everybody's in sync. It's interesting to watch that team effort kind of come together. So I like the Bonneville stuff. I had a good time. It was neat to set a record. We were lucky. I was fortunate to be asked to get involved in that program. So love it.
So the lightweight thing is a little bit of a giveaway, just food for thought.
Sure.
What else do we have for Jason tonight, or are we ready to wrap up? Jason, this has been so freaking amazing.
Yeah, this is a good one, man. You made this a
about
good
fuel
podcast.
and all this stuff, and we didn't even get to touch on track prep. So we would humbly.
I'll come back. All right.
Yes,
You
we'd
know
love
what?
to
Would
have
you?
you back.
Would you? Because we'd love to have you back on that.
We'll do track prep and guitars.
Maybe on the
Okay.
100th
You know what? I
episode.
can do that all. I'm looking at my analog man koozie right now. You know, I'm good.
Oh
Shit,
Lord,
yes.
Bill, stop drooling.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. Believe me, I'm looking. I only own about 68 pedals, so
Right.
never mind.
I was going to say,
But-
Bill's a guitar junkie with
I
a budget.
downsized over the years. Like I said, I'm down to hardly anything, but I play a Friedman Double J Jerry Cantrell half stack. That's my main amp in a white.
Oh
Tolbek.
my Lord!
What kind of music does your
my
band
Lord.
play? What kind of music are you playing? I see a guy with a harmonica up there. I'm thinking I'm going to hear blues, or what's your jam?
Yeah. I played back in 97 and 98. My band was called Pitfall Harry. We played back in college at Indiana State. And, we thought we were going to do it. We opened for Great White, we thought we were going to get it, and well, we'll see where it goes. But so 20 years later, now we play about 4 times a year. We're actually playing in a couple of weeks. We're playing at a bar in town. And my bass player is a manager for Delta in Atlanta. My drummer is a big technical guru for a company out of Italy, and so he's flying back and forth to Italy all the time. And the singer lives back from. He operated a mine in North Dakota. He just moved back, so we get together a few times a year. And if it's from 1998 or newer, we don't know how to play it because we're playing our set list what we knew 20-some years ago. So
That's awesome.
We do,
No,
Alice
it's a
in
classic
Chains,
rock band.
Pilot,
Right.
Pearl Jam. I mean, all the good stuff. When you're a kid, we do a lot of blues, a lot of rock. So, yeah,
Good.
It's a lot of fun. We get
Outstanding. No, a number of us are musicians here too. That's funny. I have a music background, so that's very cool to hear. We'll have to get together and jam sometime.
That was my thing, man. I thought at one time I was gonna make it happen, and then it kind of all went to crap after that. So
I actually had a touring gig, and it got old after a year. The road sucked, but other than that, yeah, that's a tough lifestyle. The race cars are more fun. Get more satisfaction.
Somehow, we got to get the podcast blues band together.
Yes,
That's what we got to do.
true.
Oh, hey, we could go be called the Pods, man. I'd do it.
Yeah. There we go. All right.
That's fun.
I tell you what, if you ever get to talk to Mark Menser, I don't know if you know Menser.
Yes.
Yeah.
Motorsports.
I'll see him this weekend.
Mark was he was a professional guitar player. He played the Essence Festival. He's played with B.B. King.
I didn't know that.
Do you remember the Gibson Nighthawk guitar? Kind of like a funky looking Les Paul. I don't know if you've ever seen one.
Yeah.
He was the one that helped develop that. I mean, that was
No shit.
Wow, no kidding.
Unbelievable.
That's
dude,
hilarious.
it's crazy.
I'm gonna have to talk to Mark about that.
Oh yeah, and I'm telling you what, you sit him down. I used to carry 2 acoustic guitars in my trailer all the time, and one said Pooch and one said Nerd on it because he's a shock nerd. And we would come back to my trailer and throw down the jams. And our band is called GCD because you can play those 3 chords and you can make up songs about anybody. And at the end you go, and then we run. So
Classy, hilarious GCD. Yeah. Hey, I could play keyboards in that band. Not a single black key in the. It's all straight up ivories. Yeah.
Nah, but we tuned half step low, so remember.
Oh no, I'd play a different. I'd play a set of keyboard that I could just tune a step down. That's hilarious.
It's funny.
All right, well, we're gonna let you go, man, but we're gonna have you back. Maybe episode 100 here in a couple of weeks.
Anytime.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like I said, anytime you guys need anything, like I said, and like I said, and you guys, go to our website, go to vpracingfuels.com, or get on there, and if you got any tech questions, I mean, like I said, I'm readily available, and so is Tom and Freddie, and so
give them a call. Run VP Fuels for sure.
Just holler at us, and we can even say the dreaded ethanol blend.
The dreaded ethanol blends.
Oh,
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Jason, man,
All right,
thanks for being with us this evening, brother. Appreciate you.
All right, guys, we'll talk to you.
Thank you,
All
sir.
right,
You
see you
guys
later.
take care. We'll take care. Talk to you next
Bye-bye.
week. That pretty much does it. That was a good episode. Thanks so much for Jason Reckert coming in from VP Fuels. Pooch is his nickname. Very cool stuff. We're going to have him back to talk track prep. This seems like the guy that understands the chemicals behind the track prep. So anyway, thanks everybody for listening tonight. We really appreciate it, and try to do one next week. Everybody take care and have a good week. Be safe.